Even if you end up with long copy in your ad, your headline has to do the brunt of the work with only a few words. On the next clip from the Power Strategy Call, we get a glimpse into Rich's writing process and learn the level of detail and familiarity needed both of the service or product you sell and of the prospect's hot buttons to write a kick. Well, you'll see what gets kicked. Biggie.
Number 7.
Wordsmithing is something that is, in my experience, hard to teach, but I'll give you a couple of examples. I was having a discussion yesterday with Ben Lane in my office. As it relates to wordsmithing, he said, it's been bugging me for a week now. I said, what's been bugging you? He says, you came up with a headline for an ad that we did for a company. He says, I don't think I can get from point A to point Z. I said, okay, well, let me talk you through it. Now, let me tell you about the company. It's a company that's one of our insider private members, and they do management of wood materials for companies that use wood in manufacturing. I know that sounds kind of weird and hard to understand, but here's the bottom line. If you're a company that uses wood in your manufacturing process, you've got to have a way to manage the inventory, reorder the inventory, etc. Okay, so here's what happened. I came up with a headline that went like this. Now, I'm going to use the word JIT. I think most people, you know what JIT is, Rich?
Just in time.
Just in time, okay? And in the world of manufacturing, JIT is really important, just in time delivery of the materials they need. And I came up with this headline. It was JIT Nutkick. That's the headline. And then there was going to be a sub-headline with it that said, how you feel when you find out 4.5 hours later that your JIT shipment has been sitting lonely on the dock. And Ben came to me and he said, this headline, JIT Nutkick, is just so powerful, yet I would never come up with it. And I said, okay, well, let me talk you through it. And this is an important process. It has to do with just thinking through what's going on. And I said, let me walk you through what I was thinking when I wrote this headline. He says, okay, now, granted, for those of you on this call listening, you're not in this industry, you're not familiar with this industry, so this example seems sort of boring, but I don't think that the boringness or the lack of familiarity with this is nearly as important as this whole thought process. So here's what I was thinking. This is a company that basically they've taken the grocery store model of inventory control and they've applied it to something a lot cruder, typically, called wood inventory. Here's what that means. If you go to the grocery store and you pull a can of Van Camp's pork and beans off the shelf, you take it up to the counter, what happens? You scan it. It beeps, and it automatically triggers an inventory adjustment within the computers. And now that store knows that it has one less can of Franken beans, and it also knows when it gets to a certain level, it needs to trigger an automatic order with the supplier to bring the next quantity of Franken beans to the store. True enough, Rich? Are you with me so far?
Yep.
Well, in wood manufacturing, they don't have this concept. Basically, they've got people that have to go and eyeball it, and they have to make sure that when the company orders inventory out of their own inventory, in other words, when they go to use the wood in their inventory for production, they've got to make sure that it's properly noted in the computer how much was used, when it was used, and then they manually place these orders so that they can get a restockment of their on-site inventory so that they've always got enough wood. Well, here's the problem with that. Most of these companies that we would be selling this service to have just-in-time delivery, and it's a big buzzword, of course, with manufacturing. We've got JIT. And so a lot of times there's an objection to ownership that says, well, we don't need your services because we perceive that we already have what you do, which is called just-in-time. We've already got just-in-time. We already have a good handle on our inventory. Now, are you seeing where there's a possibility for this normal, traditional system to break down? Do you see it, Rich?
Absolutely.
Because it's relying on people to enter things into computer. It's not done in an automated fashion. So if John forgets to notate in the computer that they took out 7 beams of a certain length, then the just-in-time ordering process really doesn't accurately reflect what they have or what they need. Also, if the order is delivered to the dock, but it's not properly keyed into the system that, hey, we've received this, then people might look at the inventory and say, well, gosh, we don't have what we need. Let's go ahead and order it, when in fact it's already been ordered, when in fact it may be already sitting there on their dock and they just didn't know it. So these guys solve all that problem by doing everything automated. It's all barcoded, just like in a grocery store and a clothing store. It's pretty forward-thinking. It's a very interesting process. Now, that's a long story, and it's a lot of details to get to the point. As I was thinking through this, I was looking at that going, wow, if somebody says objection to ownership, well, we already have just in time, we don't need this. I was thinking through all of these scenarios of, well, how could it go wrong still? What could be the problem still? And I envisioned this guy ordering some inventory and not realizing that they already had a cargo load of it sitting there that had been delivered, but they didn't realize it because it hadn't been keyed in, or somebody thinking that they had the inventory in their current on-site inventory, but in fact it had been depleted. They didn't know about it, so they're just in time didn't know to trigger the order because humans, had not actually made the effort to update it. So their just-in-time program was working splendidly, and I thought, what would happen if you needed that wood and it wasn't in inventory when your computer showed that it was? Your just-in-time had worked flawlessly. What would happen? How would that feel? What would that look like? And this goes back to that process. If you remember the John Smith statements, do you remember that process, Rich? And I said, literally do this. You don't have to, but it's an interesting exercise. Literally lay down, relax, at least lean your chair back, close your eyes, and put yourself in John Smith's shoes. And I thought, wow, if this was the case, it would literally be like a nut kick.
If you're not writing your marketing by channeling John Smith, whether by leaning back in your chair and closing your eyes, or working through the MYM John Smith headline writing tools, no amount of wordsmithing is going to help. You can massage your headline until it's frame-worthy, but if it isn't what John Smith cares about, he's never going to read it.